Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Ellen and in this video I wanted to do a book tag. So I saw Andrew from Andrew's Wizardly Reads do this 20 question book tag and I loved his answers and I thought the questions were really fun. So I thought that I would do the tag too. And let's get started. So I'm going to be looking at my screen for the questions here. The first question is, how many books are too many books in a series? Right now, I typically like trilogies. I think 3 books in a series is pretty good. And when I was a kid though, I really enjoyed Nancy Drew, which there's like over 50 books in the Nancy Drew series. And I think it's because I really loved Nancy as a character and each book was almost like its own standalone. Like you didn't really need to read the books in order to have fun with the story. So in a series like that, if I really enjoy the character, then I don't really care how long it is, as long as each adventure or each storyline is good. So that's how I feel. If it's like a series where the book has to build on one another, so you have to read them in order, then I think 3 or 4 books is kind of my maximum, unless it's like a really epic fantasy book series, which, you know, Brandon Sanderson has some really big books. So maybe I can kind of give an exception for books like that. In general, I think trilogies or quartets are kind of my norm. Question 2, how do you feel about cliffhangers? I love cliffhangers, and it has to be a good cliffhanger. It makes me want to reach for the next book as soon as possible. And that's typically why I wait until the series is either mostly done or completely done before I get started, because if it's really good and I really want to read them, then I have the whole series to binge whenever I want. And I don't like to wait. If there's a really good cliffhanger, I don't want to wait a whole year before I can find out what happens. So I love cliffhangers. 3, hardcover or paperback? I typically only get hardcover if I just happen to buy the book when it just came out. Typically, I really love paperbacks. They're lighter, they're easier for me to carry around. I'm personally not a Kindle person, so I don't really have a Kindle. I don't want a Kindle personally. So if I go traveling or if I go somewhere where I know I'm gonna be reading or have time to read, then I prefer a paperback. It's less heavy, it's easier to read, and it's just more satisfying for me to hold. 4, my favorite book. Oh, this one's really hard. I don't know if I can just pick a favorite book. Like my favorite books to reread are like the lighter kind of contemporary books. Like Sarah Dessen has written so many nice books that I've reread so many times when I was younger, and maybe I'll reread them again more as an adult. But like her books Just Listen or The Truth About Forever, like her books are just so heartfelt and great coming of age stories, so I love to reread those. But a book that makes me think a lot about life is Ishmael by Daniel Quinn. I think I have the book right here. So this book, if you've never read it, I highly recommend you read it. This is about a man is searching for like a spiritual teacher, and he sees an ad in the newspaper for a teacher looking for a student. He goes to the location listed in the newspaper ad, and he finds a gorilla. And it is the gorilla who's the teacher, who's wanting the student to teach. And the things he's teaching about is about life and humans' role in the planet and nature, and how we have affected so many things in nature and other animals. This book probably is one of my favorites. It's not something I would reread very often, but it is so impactful and I really enjoy it. And it's something that I really recommend people read if they haven't. My least favorite book. Oh man, my least favorite book. This is a little tough because if a book has left such a bad impression on me, I just instantly delete it from my brain and pretend it doesn't exist. So let me think. Oh, so a book I really didn't like that I recently DNF'd was Heaven by Miyako Kawakami. By the time you're seeing this, you saw that I raved about her Breasts and Eggs novel. And it's not like I hated necessarily the book Heaven, but it is just so hard to read. The intense bullying, the things this kid goes through, and he just keeps dealing with it, and I just don't know how. So it's like my least favorite because it's the most painful for me to read. It's something, like, I just don't condone bullying. I hate it. I've always stood up to bullies when I was being teased as a kid, and I just couldn't. I had to put the book down. I'm like, nope, I'm not reading this. Love triangles, yes or no? I guess sometimes I am a sucker for love triangles, but only if the options for the love interest brings a good dynamic for the main character. Like, they add something. I don't want it to be like a shallow, he's like the best friend and he's the bad guy, but he's so enticing. Like, I need something more than that. It needs to have depth, and both guys or both women or man and woman, whoever the love interests are, they have to bring out the best in the main character for me to really root for the love triangle. And I want the struggle to be real because both options are great. They both bring out a good side of the character, but it's tough to choose, you know? So those kind of love triangles I do enjoy. I don't want it to be like an obvious one for me. Like, it's so obvious which one I would choose. I like it when it makes me stop and think, like, wait a minute, which one would I choose, you know? So I like those kind of love triangles. 7, the most recent book you just couldn't finish. That would be Heaven by Miyako Kawakami. 8, a book you're currently reading. I am currently reading The Wolf of Oron by K.S. Veloso, and I'm really liking it so far. I'm maybe a third of the way through. So this is my current read. I've been kind of in a bit of a reading slump, so I haven't been reading as much as I usually do, but I'm still plugging along. 9, the last book you recommended to someone. The last book I recommended to someone... Actually, I recommended Breasts and Eggs to one of my friends, Sylvia. She's one of my besties, and we both love reading, so I think I recommended Breasts and Eggs to her. I also recommended The Convenience Store Woman, and she's also intrigued by The Wolf of Oron. Let's see. 10, oldest book you've read. I think the oldest book I've read is the Jane Austen book, Pride and Prejudice. I believe that's the oldest one I've ever read. I haven't read that many classics, so I'm pretty sure that's my oldest read. The newest book I've read by publication date is probably The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. I read that a couple months ago, and I think that's the newest book that I have that I read. 12, favorite author. Well, as an adult, I don't really have like a favorite author. I have authors that I enjoy, but I don't have one that just soars above everybody else. For nostalgia purposes, I would probably say either Carolyn Keene, I think, is the name they chose for the Nancy Drew books, or Sarah Dessen, who wrote a lot of the teenage coming-of-age stories that I mentioned previously. I just think she's a really exceptional writer, and she knows how to invoke the feelings that we have when we're growing up really well. 13, buying books or borrowing books. Well, I love borrowing books from the library, especially borrowing books that I'm not sure I'm gonna love, and I want to try it out and see if it's a book that I'll enjoy. But in general, I really love buying books. Like, I know I only have this one bookshelf here. We just don't have room in our bedroom to store more right now. So I have a bunch of books like in storage right now. I love buying books. It's my big dream to be like Belle from Beauty and the Beast and have this huge library. It's something I mentioned to my husband at least once a month, that I want my own library someday. So I do love buying books, especially when they're books I end up really enjoying. And I do like to reread my books from time to time. So I do love to buy books, so they're always at my disposal when I'm in the mood to read them. 14, a book you dislike that everyone else seems to love. Let's see. A book I dislike that everyone seems to love. Let me take a look here. I think my option for this would have to be The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. So I don't dislike this book per se. I did enjoy it, so maybe this isn't the best answer for this question. I did enjoy it, but I feel like everyone else just seems to love it. Like, they just intensely love this book. And I did enjoy it, but at times it ran a little bit slow, and I didn't really love the ending that much. So like I enjoyed it, but I just didn't love it to that next level that I feel like so many other people did. And so for that part, I don't really understand, and I kind of disagree with that. Like, I think it was a good book, but it was like a 3.5-star read for me, whereas everyone else thinks it's more of a 5-star. I think when I originally read it, I put 5 stars on Goodreads, but after further reflection, I think it was more because everyone else was loving it, and since I liked it, I was like, sure, 5 stars, that's great. But now I'm just like, no, that was more of a 3.5-star read. Like, I enjoyed it, that's not a bad rating, but it's not a book that I just like raved and just loved and recommended to everyone. It wasn't that kind of book for me, if that makes sense. 15, bookmarks or dog ears. Okay, so when I was a kid, I used to dog ear my pages. I know, that's painful. I'm sorry. I was a kid. I didn't know any better. And no shame to anyone that does dog ear their books. But now I don't. Now I use bookmarks. I have a bookmark here. I use bookmarks for my books now. The only time I ever dog ear is if I'm desperate and I don't want to lose my spot and I don't have time to search for a bookmark or even just a scrap of paper or anything. So I use bookmarks now as an adult, unless I'm in an emergency situation and I want to save my spot. I used to dog ear as a kid. I'm sorry. Okay, 16, a book you can always reread. Well, Ishmael by Daniel Quinn is one. The Sarah Dessen books that I mentioned before, I can reread those at any time. Those books actually help me get out of a reading slump, so I should go to my storage unit and probably read one of her books soon because I'm starting to feel slumpy. 17, can you read while hearing music? No, I cannot. It's so distracting. Even if it's music with no lyrics in the background, it's still distracting for me. That's why I like reading at night or when my daughter naps because it's usually quiet. I can't listen to music or have any other kind of background noise when I read. 18, one POV or multiple POVs? Sometimes one point of view can really make the story go a little bit faster in some ways, especially if it's a point of view that I'm loving. Then I don't want to have a different point of view. But at the same time, multiple point of views can really add dynamics to the story, and you get to see different viewpoints, and the plot can kind of move along quicker, or you get a more expanded view on what's going on when you see different perspectives, especially if the perspectives are on opposite sides of a conflict or different countries, whatever. Maybe in general, I would say multiple point of views. That way you can get like a broader spectrum of what's going on in the story. And the only downside to that though is if there's a point of view that I'm not really loving that's mixed in there, it does make the story go a little bit slower if I'm not loving them as much. But I do think it brings a lot of depth to this story. 19, do you read a book in one sitting or over multiple days? Over multiple days. With a 17-month-old kid, I want to be able to sit down and just read all day, but it's just not realistic when you have a child, especially one that's young who still needs my attention and me helping them to eat and drink and all that. So I just don't have the time to just read whenever I want or however long I want to. So I do read a book. If I'm lucky if I read one book in a week, honestly. I'm really lucky if I can read 2 in a week, if that includes an audiobook and a physical book. But unfortunately, it has to be multiple days at this point in my life. And question 20, who do you tag? I tag anyone that wants to do this. I think this is such a fun way to get to know someone, especially like their reading tastes. So I tag anyone who wants to do it. And if you do decide to do it because you saw my video, then let me know, because I would love to watch your video if you decide to do this tag. Well, that is it, guys. That is all the questions for this tag. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. And let me know, do you have similar answers to me or do you differ from me? I'd love to hear your points of view on these. Until next time, guys. Bye.